I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about setting the scene. So I'm not going to talk about the politics, more about energy policy and some of the challenges that we face here in the UK. And some of those themes I'm going to start off with. The previous speaker talked about the politics of energy. So the first thing I'd say is, when you look at all the major parties in the UK, most of them are very pro-decarbonisation and net zero. And probably the difference between them is very much the pace of that decarbonisation. So the Conservatives have set a target of 2050 for net zero, the Lib Dems a slightly more aggressive 2045, and as the previous speaker spoke, 2030 for Labour. But there's generally cross-party support about the need to decarbonise. I think the second big theme, and again the previous speaker alluded to this, is the sense of urgency. If you look at the Extinction Rebellion, as you quite rightly pointed out, Greta Thunberg, 12 months ago, I think generally there was an appetite that we had to address climate change, but it wasn't the same urgency. In the last 6 to 8 months, that has gained significant momentum. And there's a lot of pressure on politicians, governments, and business to address this much more quickly, hence the reason why we have a net zero target here in the UK. I think the other big theme is how much is it going to cost and who's going to pay for it. So if you look at some of the information that's in the public domain, the Committee for Climate Change has come out with a figure of £1 trillion for the UK. More recently, Scottish Power came out with a paper about a week or two ago, and they talked about the decarbonisation of the transport sector and the heating sector, which will be a big part of that challenge, and reinforcement of network grids, and they're talking about £300 billion. So quite significant sums of money already that are being bandied about. And who exactly is going to pay for this? If I look at the government, they look fairly stretched already. They're making strategic investments, they're seeding money into innovation to support clean energy, but there's only so far that they can go. And if you look at the public, the consumer, and the consumer is driving a lot of this change, this environmental pressure. I'm not sure the consumer is aware how much they're actually on the hook to pay. And you only have to look across the channel to France, when you had President Macron, who hiked up fuel duty in France, and that triggered a social backlash with our notorious colleagues, the Gilets jaunes. So I think that's still going to be a hot issue. The penultimate theme I just want to flag to you is we talk a lot about meeting net zero. It's important to be aware that there is no silver bullet around this. There is not a single technology that's going to help us meet that target. There's going to be a portfolio play of technologies. So you think about, for example, renewables, so solar, onshore, offshore wind will have a big part to play in that. Nuclear, providing firm capacity, so when the wind isn't blowing or the sun isn't shining, you're going to need some kind of firm capacity, so nuclear will have a part to play in that. Hydrogen has a big role to play. Now, there's been a lot of talk about hydrogen for a long time. It feels as though this is another new era, a new dawn for hydrogen. So there's an opportunity for hydrogen in terms of heating, blending it with gas, potentially replacing gas in heating. Think about it, I think there's about 24 million households in the UK, 85% of which are actually fed off natural gas. So that's a big opportunity there. We talk a lot about electrification of transport. Hydrogen can play potentially a big role in heavy-duty vehicles, where electrification is a bit more of a challenge. And then the other big area is carbon capture and storage. So if you think about those industrial clusters, particularly in this region as well, there's an opportunity there for those heavy carbon emitters like iron cement producers to decarbonize using these different technologies. So it's a portfolio play. And I think even there's not only in terms of the technologies, but even in terms of the geography. So I think there'll be parts of the country where certain types of play are more effective, perhaps hydrogen in this region, CCS in this region. In the south, there may be other plays. So just be aware that there's different types of complementary technologies that will be at play. And I think the last point I just want to make is it's not going to be easy, right? I think the UK has been extremely successful in decarbonising so far. You only have to look at the power sector. I think between 2013 and 2018, 55% reduction in carbon emissions in power. And if you look at where most of our electricity is being generated now, a lot of it's from renewable. And that's been a big achievement for the UK. But the power sector, I think, represents something like just 16% of total UK emissions. But the big one is going to be heating, which we've talked about, and transportation as well. You're beginning to see momentum with electric vehicles and EV charging, and we can talk a little bit more about it in the Q&A. But I think we've still got a long way to go there. So I think that's one of the reality checks. I think the other reality check is the UK, in terms of its carbon emission footprint globally. If you look at the BP Statistical Review, for example, it's 1.2% of global emissions. Yeah. China is about 28%, the US is 15%. So we are a drop in the ocean. And I totally recognize that the UK has to some way make a symbolic gesture about setting the precedent. We pioneered the Industrial Revolution, we're going to pioneer the low carbon revolution, but it needs to be kept in context. But having said all that, I'm a positive guy, so I'd like to leave on a positive note, which is that we are very well placed to meet net zero, but it's going to require a significant amount of investment. It's going to require a lot of government support in terms of regulatory drivers that sets the pace. You're going to need the private sector actively involved in bringing all their capabilities, technology, and investment. You're going to need a lot of innovation in terms of innovation of technology, innovation of business models that allow some of these technologies, which are quite expensive, to actually come into play. And finally, I think what you need is a very strong partnership between government and the private sector that can drive that transition. So I'm confident that we will achieve it, but it won't be easy. I'm going to stop there. Okay.